Welcome back to Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm really glad to have with me once again Gene Epstein. He's been absent from this show for a couple of months now, I guess, and so it's really good to have him back with us. Gene, for those of you who may not know Gene, I can't imagine there's too many of you out there who don't know and recognize his name because he's been a long-time writer with Barron's. He writes the Economic Beat column and also does a great job of reviewing books for that prestigious publication. And Gene also heads up something called the New York City Junto, which I've mentioned to you most every month here on this show. That's held, it's free of charge, it's a meeting anyone can go to. Starts at 7:30 at 20 West 44th Street in New York City between 5th and 6th Avenues. And always a great venue, and Gene Epstein does a fantastic job of keeping an orderly discussion, spirited, orderly, and sometimes contentious, but always enjoyable and informative. So thanks for joining me again, Gene. It's good to have you with me again.
Pleasure to be back.
Yeah, it really is good to have you. I want you to tell us a little bit about what is coming up this Thursday at the Junto meeting. We have a debate, and it has to do with geopolitics. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's going to be another Oxford-style debate in that there will be a resolution and a vote by people before and after. The resolution, as agreed upon by both parties, is that sustaining American security, freedom, and prosperity will require a greater assertion of geopolitical leadership and military power. Now, speaking for the resolution will be Thomas Donnelly of the American Enterprise Institute. American Enterprise Institute actually is, in a way, famously the think tank that essentially thought up the Iraqi war and designed it. And Thomas Donnelly is a co-author of a book called Lessons for a Long War, How America Can Win on New Battlefields. So he will be speaking for the resolution that a step up in military power by the U.S. is necessary for our security, freedom, and prosperity. Speaking against the resolution would be Cato Institute senior fellow Christopher Preble. Excuse me. He's the author of The Power Problem, How American Military Dominance Makes Us Less Safe, Less Prosperous, and Less Free. Now, I guess you can hear from the titles of those books how very much at odds our two debaters are going to be on American military power. And I think it is interesting in that this is one of the key debates between free market people who call themselves conservatives and free market people who call themselves libertarians. The libertarians do tend to be strongly non-interventionists. The conservatives, and I might add the American Enterprise Institute, I think is a bastion of the free market in many ways, but it is indeed conservative in the at least the sense that conservative has any meaning today. They do favor and support American intervention abroad. And so it will be, again, a very contentious fight, but both of the guys, Donnelly and Preble, know each other personally, and it will always be civil. Well, the audience is going to get a chance to challenge them, ask questions during the debate, and then, as mentioned, they will be able to vote for the resolution, against the resolution, or undecided about the resolution before the debate begins. Then after the debate ends, we're going to take another vote from the same audience, and whoever moves the needle wins the debate. That's a typical process, and I think it's a very good one, since the before and after then is the way in which the two debaters can affect the outcome. So it should be pretty exciting, and I hope people come Thursday evening, July 2nd. And it's, again, people often don't ask me, is it free? Yes, it is indeed free. Do you need to RSVP? No, you don't. Just walk in. It's ground floor, 20 West 44th Street, just off Fifth Avenue.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to it, Gene, that's for sure. And I believe that these are taped, aren't they? They're recorded, and people can actually listen to these discussions online. Do they go to nycjunto.org? Is that where they go for that? Or where?
That's correct. Yes, I have your show on my smartphone as a podcast, And I listened to that, and indeed, all the Junto events going back more than a year, including a lecture I delivered, for example, on the Piketty book, Piketty's book,
Yes.
Capital in the 20s, is available online. We had a debate between John Mackey and Nina Teicholz on food, and this is the second Oxford-style debate we're having. The third is going to be in October, and that's going to be on anarcho-capitalism. That's another contentious debate between certain elements who are libertarian and others. And Richard Epstein, who's a prominent libertarian, is going to defend limited government, whereas Michael Huemer, who's an anarcho-capitalist philosopher, is going to defend anarcho-capitalism. That should be exciting as well. But this time it's going to be foreign policy.
Oh, it's going to be both of them.
Everything is available on, as you mentioned, on podcast. If you just put in Junto into your smartphone.
Oh, that's really great, and I know I know where I come down from this, Gene, and I was just wondering, so you're looking for the swing vote here, because I'm imagining, and I know a lot of the folks at the New York City Junto, I know a lot of them are more, would certainly be inclined to go with Thomas Donnelly, and then there are others, I suppose, that are there more like myself that will go with, be inclined to go with Mr. Preble, but we'll see. I think we all want to try to keep an open mind, but sometimes our very basic philosophies make it very difficult sometimes to cross that line, I suppose. I mean, I have a Daniel McAdams of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity that comes on and does podcasts with me all the time, and he's giving me a version of what's happening in the world that is completely different than what we get in the mainstream media for the most part. And somebody's got to be right, somebody's got to be wrong on these things. So I really look forward to this, Gene, and thanks so much for doing such a great job as you do with these discussions and keeping it civil and all that. Want to ask you a little bit about a couple of the ideas that you've passed on and are planning to pass on to your readers at Barron's, having to do with employment or unemployment. First of all, you mentioned it, I think, in a recent article that you wrote on the 15th of June, job demand warms up, but supply lacks jolt. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has a statistic called job openings and labor turnover, or JOLTS for short. What can you tell us about this statistic, and what is it telling you now about our labor situation in the United States? Well,
It is telling us, as you say, it's called JOLTS. It's been compiled since the year 2000. This monthly number, which takes a snapshot at the end of each month on the number of available jobs, and all of these measures are imperfect, but the trend is certainly very telling. And what it found was that at the end of April, the most recent number available, in about next week we're going to have an update on the May figure, but at the end of April, the number of available jobs was at a high for this series at 5.4 million, and that indicated that jobs are reasonably plentiful, but we also found, though, that the number of hires is lagging. We find a sort of anomalous situation that usually, in terms of the trend on the number of hires in relation to that 5.4 million, there should have been many more hires, at least in terms of the 15-year trend that the data exposed. And yet we have relatively a big lag in hires in relation to available jobs, and that seems to indicate actually that there's a kind of a tight labor market. We read anecdotal evidence, stories in the journal about builders trying to hire workers and finding it difficult to get willing hands. And so it's an odd, very different perspective on what is commonly thought of as going on in the labor market, that jobs are hard to get. In fact, it looks as though, based upon these numbers, that jobs are reasonably plentiful, but that the skills, the geography, or maybe some other attitudes on the part of people is that they're reluctant to take these jobs. Now, I don't moralize about that. Maybe that means that the second earner in the family wants to get a higher wage, and I think that probably signals that wages are going to rise, which I think basically at this point is a good thing. Wages have not risen very quickly. But at least that's different from the way the New York Times tends to portray, for example, the progressive press, the left-leaning press tends to portray what is going on in the labor market. And certainly I've been reporting for the last year or so that there has been, I've been a distressing decline in labor force participation, a certain lack of interest in getting a job that's unusually strong of late. There are reasons for it. There's certainly the huge increase in the number of people who now get disability. I believe that if you go on disability, you can get an average of about $1,200 a month in money for the rest of your life, and you can also get health benefits. And I believe that it's fairly clear that a lot of people, the data show, a lot of people who are prime age have gone on disability. Probably what they are doing is in some way supplementing their income in the below ground, in the cash economy. But it's not, you can get by on that amount, and certainly if you supplement, you can also manage it. It's something that Charles Murray, for example, the conservative critic who wrote years ago, wrote Losing Ground, who's not afraid to say things that are politically incorrect, who points out that just when you would have thought over the last 30 years that we'd have a lower share of workers on disability because the dangerous work has declined, the dangerous work that does exist is less dangerous than it ever was, and yet we have had a huge increase in the numbers and in the share of people on disability, mainly because the rules have become even more lax. Another economist named Casey Mulligan, a labor market economist, has bravely pointed out that Obamacare is bringing disincentives to work as well, making it in certain ways more expensive to have a full-time job than to have a part-time job. The increase in the number of part-time, and also employers are pulling in their horns because of Obamacare, and it looks as though they are not offering full-time employment the way they might have in the past. So a lot of bad things are going on in the labor market, and it's often been overlooked. Even overlooked, of course, by many of my fellow libertarians who like to argue that things are terrible all around. In fact, it's jobs definitely, as mentioned. Maybe the wages ain't great, but it's difficult to imagine that any unemployed person cannot find a job pretty quickly if that person really wanted a job.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way, and I can't help but think, Gene, as I listen to you talk there about the differences between now and the 1930s. So trying to make any comparison just doesn't make sense because there's all kinds of reasons now, I think, that for not working that might not have been in place in the 1930s as well. And also you have two wage earners for the most part now, whereas in the 1930s I think mostly at least in married households the wife would be at home and so forth. So you are preparing, I think, with a couple of minutes left here. I believe, Gene, you're writing something this coming weekend. Perhaps it touches on the male participation.
Well, it will be it'll be out in a. I commented recently on. Actually, I sent you this. This is a fascinating large issue which we should discuss sometime in the future. There is this idea, an odd kind of idea looming in the Atlantic, devoted a huge cover story to it this past week in the August issue about the future of work. That work is disappearing, robots are taking over, and made the odd point that men can't find work. That's the men cannot find work, and apparently it's because men cannot find manufacturing jobs, and it said that they can't find jobs for which they are best suited, and it says, and now that's all. That in itself is probably a myth. The idea that men loved manufacturing work and that's kind of silly. That used to be terrible manufacturing. Now they mourn manufacturing, but then they say, well, men are not working. They're not in the labor force because they can't find jobs for which they are best suited. So I commented that, well, in the grown-up world, even of the 1960s and 1950s, certainly 1930s, of course we all want a job for which we are best suited, but in order to support ourselves and support our families, sometimes we'll take jobs that are just second best and third best, since we all have to get by in this world. But the point is that that kind of ethos that expressed in this article was rather surprising. That men desert the labor force because they're not getting the jobs for which they are best suited. And so I only made that point, that there is clearly a decline in the culture, and that it probably, if we look to disability roles, we look to other things that are going on in the culture, we'll probably get the answer as to why fewer people are working. Not because the work is disappearing, and not because men are not getting jobs for which they are best suited, which indeed was the point that the Atlantic cover story stressed. So that the progressives are not going to be able to teach us anything about what's going on in the world of work, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, it is a complicated picture for sure, Gene, and I thank you very much for helping to clarify it and bring out some of the dynamics that are there that explain what seems to be maybe something that seems to be worse than it actually is. So I think you also mentioned here, with just a minute left or so, you in your June 15th article, you did mention that in fact consumer spending does seem to be picking up, which would be in line with a tighter labor market, I would guess.
In line with the labor market, wealth is picking up. I mean, I'm not. I mean, definitely the economy moves from boom to bust, but it does appear, and indeed, I believe that we are, as conventionally measured, in a situation where growth is probably running 3.5%, which ain't great. It's not nearly what the U.S. economy could do or what the U.S. economy has done in the past, but 3.5% is better than the economy economy has done so far during the expansion that began in mid 2009. So indeed, I do see some silver lining going on in the economy at this point.
Well, that's good news, Gene. We like to have you on now and then just to keep us from becoming so depressed, clinically depressed, and they have to take us away. So,
for me.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Gene. We're out of time. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us. Really greatly appreciated. And I look forward to seeing you at the New York City Junto, 20 West 44th Street, 7:30 this coming Thursday. Folks, all of you out there, as many as live in this area, please come and visit. Attend this event. You're certainly going to enjoy it if you do.